el hijo de legua, yo trabajo con Ogún. Yo soy el hijo de legua, yo trabajo con Ogún. Yo soy el negrito guapo, chambele, que rompo piedra con los pies. Me llaman el rompemonte, me dicen el invasor. Yo soy el negrito bueno, el hijo del Salvador. Yo soy el hijo de legua, yo trabajo con Ogún. Yo soy el hijo de legua, yo trabajo con Ogún. Yo soy el negrito guapo, chambele, que rompo piedra con los pies. Me llaman el rompemonte, me dicen el invasor. Yo soy el negrito bueno, el hijo del Salvador. Chambele, 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 yo trabajo bonito, no vacuno. Sara yeyeo no vacuno, hago ile mi legua no vacuno. Sara yeyeo no vacuno, que yo pense lo malo no vacuno. Sara yeyeo no vacuno, yo trabajo en candela no vacuno. Sara yeyeo no vacuno. Hago, voy un pelegua, voy un boyosi, voy un bogún. Claro, oye, hago ile.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of the Divination Table. Today our special guest is, and I'm getting some audio here. Let's see if that helps. So today our special guest is Melanie Mitchell, who is an empath, an intuitive, an entrepreneur, creator of the Coastal Lenormands, and this month the launch of an intuitive website called Virtual Mystics. She has spent years working in the divination arena using various tools and gifts, but only has worked professionally for the last 10 years, starting with astrology and premonitory dreams. And in her 20s, she's picked up the study of cartomancy and tarot to better convey her messages to clients and friends. I feel that no matter where you come from in your spiritual path, there's always more that you can learn by studying other spiritual, psychological, and divination practices. We gather peace and better understanding of our place in this world. Please welcome Melanie Mitchell. Melanie, are you with us?
Hi.
Hey.
I'm here.
I'm getting a little echo. Hopefully nobody else hears that. It could be my headset. So Melanie,
on yours at the beginning.
Yeah, well, you know, growing pains. So, tell us a little bit about your divination techniques and what it is that you actually do and how you began on the path of divination.
The path of divination, I feel, starts when you're really young. Because I had premonitory dreams. I had dreams that came true, and I didn't have anyone really to talk to about it. And so for me, it started at age 5 when I first remembered that dream that I had, and the next day the things that were in my dream appeared to me on the street. And so I didn't come from a family of people that practiced divination other than, you know, a religious practice, which was Christianity. So I really didn't focus much attention on it as a child. I pretty much just let it go with the flow, knew it was there for a reason, trusted that God had given me this for a reason, even if nobody else could explain it to me. I knew it was there. I just didn't explore it any further than what it was, just the visions that I was having. And even when I was young as well, I hate to say it this way, but I basically could read other people, read energy, read other people very easily.
Well, it does start when we're young. As long as we come from a family that does not hinder your growth.
No, not at all. I mean, I felt, there was a brief period of time, like when you're at age 5 and you have these huge, humongous kind of epic, apocalyptic sometimes things, and things happen. There's a little bit of fear involved, and so you tend to recede until you have a more mature physical experience, and you can kind of exchange ideas with your peers, or read books. Like the first book I picked up was an astrology book, and I started reading that, and I went, oh. And so then I would associate the people in my life to these signs, and did they fit? And then I would use it in my own sense of, and picking out, what's your sign, and asking them and see if that fits. So that was my first sort of, I want to say technically, like a technical divination practice with astrology. And then I always played cards. So always, my grandmother always played cards with me. And that was always something that was really, and I've always been really into. So when I left school, I was very religious as a teenager, because I knew that stuff had to come from somewhere, and I didn't feel like it was coming from within me. Well, as an adult, I have a different perspective. When I was a child, I just needed a little bit of faith, and so that's where that came in for me. And then when I was a young adult and went to college and I went purposely branched out into, going to see what the Jewish faith was like, and going to see what Mormons were studying, and going to all the different factions of religions to try to figure out that aspect of it. What was religion? Why was religion even created? So I was really, and at that point realized that spirituality is only a small part. Religion isn't really spirituality. From my perspective, there's spirit involved in it, but it's not what spirituality eventually became for me. So that's when I bifurcated from my religious practice to a more spiritual practice. And then shortly after that, someone read tarot for me, and I could, when I looked at the cards, I read the story without ever knowing what the cards meant. And then I immediately associated someone said, oh, aces, hearts. And I went, oh, like playing cards. And they go, yeah, you can use playing cards. And so that's kind of where then I started tarot, then cartomancy.
Yeah, you're a lot like me. You can pretty much pick up any type of divination, right, learn any style, look at any particular type of cards, because you're very intuitive. So,
intuitive is,
you'll pick up those, which cards are those?
It's always fun to have peers that are similar in your practice. But yeah, honestly, it's true. And I didn't really have a clear audience moment until I was in my 30s. But I've always had visions. I've always had dreams and visions. And thankfully, because I'm an artist, I've had a medium to be able to get them out and to use them. And we can go into that part a little bit later, some of the creations I've made. But
yeah, well, you created your own deck of cards too, right?
Yes, I did. I've designed Lenormand his recent for me. Like, I only say when I've been reading it for 3 or 4 years have I been using the Lenormand system. And when I first started with it, and there's a lot behind it, but when I first started with it, I couldn't find a deck that I wanted, so I created one. And without really knowing it, which really actually to me, I took a set of my photographs from my area of the world, and just it helped me to learn the system a lot easier by just creating it. I'm a graphic artist by trade.
Right.
Well, and one of the things that I do.
Yeah, and it's weird because I firmly believe that in creating your own deck, you learn a lot more about each individual card because you put a lot into it, what type of image you want to use,
right.
It's
true. I think that, and even when you look at, as any of our listeners that own a lot of decks, and a lot of people are deck collectors, that you can feel the energy, and it all shifts from each different deck. Each deck has its own energy because the creator of the deck has their own energy, and it creates the energy that's in the deck. And I know that may not sound accurate to some people, which for me, that's my experience, because I, as an intuitive and an empath, I pick up the energy from whatever it is that's there. Like some decks I can't use because for that very reason. We won't go down that path. But when I created it and I explored by selling it or handing it out or giving it to people and getting feedback, that deck has a specific energy, and it was consistent across the board from the people that have used it. So,
and it's one of those things. Cards, pretty much any type of divination is a tool to tap into our intuitive side. I mean, heck, I read somebody's 2018 reading in a bowl of what looked like goulash, which started out as a joke in your Facebook group. And they asked me, she's like, well, how did you get all that from a bowl of mac? And it's just a tool. You use it to tap into that intuitive side. And it started out as a joke, but it turned out more than that. I just started laughing.
No, it's fun, and it's true. If you are capable, if you're truly gifted, then you should be able to use just about anything to get a message to someone that's supposed to be conveyed at that time.
Now, you also have a Facebook group called Virtual Mystics. Can you tell us what the group itself is about?
So a few years ago, when I first started professionally reading, I only did it online because all of my readings that I've done in person have just been for friends and family, and normally as a party gig, and I wasn't taking any payment for it. But then I came into a position in my life where I actually needed to make some income, and I wasn't working at a full-time job, and I had been getting readings online, and one of the advisors said to me, do this. I did it. And one of the readers that I read with at the time says, oh, I see you're going to have your own website. It's going to be called Virtual Mystics, and we can go into that later. But because I wasn't even thinking about it at the time. So and as a reader, we go to other readers, people. This is not an expose, but still we do. So he told me that, and it just sat in my brain. And so it's kind of one of those things where that divine moment the Spirit said, it's time for you to create a platform. I'm like, oh man, come on! Like I don't want to have a whole bunch of extra work to do. But then I realized why. Most of the platforms we work on as service industry people. I mean, basically, we'll just put it in brass tacks. It's a service industry, and they take 40 to 60% of the monetary income to work on these people's sites. So my goal ultimately, and will be in the next month, it's going to be up, to create a platform where that percentage is cut in half, because I don't feel like as a service, and as an artist, it's in the same way for me. All of my life, I've done a lot of work for people take 50% of my income for my ideas, my readings, or my whatever.
Right.
So I'm just kind of set on that goal. And so I created a Facebook. I was with another friend of mine, and I set it up, and she since then has exited the scene, but I continue to build up this community of people that are learning how to use their intuition, or learning how to guide that spirit voice that's inside them and channel it towards either tools or, their gifts, and how to hone that, and to exchange the energy and find a group that can be around like-minded people, because it's not always accessible to everyone. Like parts of the world where people don't have that in their peer community. I mean, I'm fortunate. I live in California. There's a lot of people out there who practice divination and meditation and yoga and qigong. I mean, there's just like everywhere. You swing a cat, And so I'm very fortunate that in my area. And so we've created this that I have access to that. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason is for like-minded people to get together. And then the ultimate reason is to